So, back in early 2026, something pretty big happened. India and the United States, the two biggest democracies on the planet, unveiled a major new trade framework. And look, this isn't just some run of the mill agreement. People are calling it a landmark deal, one that could totally redefine their economic relationship for years to come.
Okay, but let's just cut to the chase, right? A new trade deal. So what? I mean, you hear about these things all the time. What makes this one so special? Why should you actually care about it? Well, that's exactly what we're going to unpack right here. All right, so let's get into the nitty-gritty. To really get why this matters, we first have to be super clear on what this framework actually is, and maybe even more importantly, what it isn't.
Okay, see that keyword right there? Interim. That's a huge clue. This isn't the final, signed, sealed, delivered free trade agreement. Not yet. Think of it more like a foundation, a first step to get the ball rolling on something much, much bigger later on. The whole point, for now, is to kind of hit the reset button on their trade relationship.
So, what's actually in this thing? What are the moving parts? Let's peel back the layers and take a look at what India and the US are actually bringing to the table.
All right, the first and biggest thing you'll notice, tariffs are coming down. We're talking about those taxes on imported goods. For a long, long time, they've been a major sticking point, a real source of friction. And this deal takes that problem head on. And this number? It really puts it into perspective. The US has slashed tariffs on a whole bunch of Indian products. We're talking about a drop from some really high, almost punishing levels, all the way down to around this 18% mark. That is a huge reduction. It makes Indian goods way more competitive in the American market, almost overnight. And make no mistake, this is a two-way street. It's not just a one-sided deal. India is cutting its tariffs too. And the things they chose here, totally not random. These sectors represent stuff both countries have wanted for a long time. So while Indian textiles and pharma get a better shot in the US, American farmers selling nuts and fruits and US industrial companies will find it easier and cheaper to sell their products in India. But lowering taxes is only one piece of the puzzle. A lot of times, the real headache for businesses isn't the tax. It's all the complicated rules, the red tape, what the experts call non-tariff barriers. And this framework is designed to start smoothing those out too. So the whole agreement is basically built on these four main pillars. We talked about the first two, slashing tariffs and clearing the way for better market access. But look at those last two, investment and digital trade. This shows the deal is also thinking about the future, right? It's tackling things like energy security and the rules for the digital economy, which is just exploding. And speaking of that third pillar, investment, India has signaled it's ready to make a major commitment. There's a really ambitious target being talked about for India to ramp up its imports of American stuff. We're talking energy, tech, food, by a pretty staggering number, up to $500 billion. That's over several years, but still, wow. Okay, now we have to add a little asterisk here. It's super important to know that this $500 billion number is a reported target. It's a figure that's been floating around in a lot of reports, but the official nitty-gritty details are still being hammered out. So think of it as the goal, the ambition, not a number that's set in stone just yet. All right, so we've looked at the parts. Now let's zoom out and look at the big picture. What does all this actually mean? What's the real-world impact going to be for both countries and for their relationship on the world stage? This slide just lays it out so clearly. On one hand, for India's exports, lower tariffs mean their products are cheaper and more competitive in the US. That could be a real boost for jobs in industries like textiles and machinery. Then you flip it around. For imports into India, regular consumers could get cheaper American goods, and Indian companies can buy high-tech equipment and materials for less. It's really a win-win, at least on paper.
And this is maybe the most important point of all. This deal is about so much more than just dollars and cents. It's really about building a deeper strategic partnership. I mean, think about what's happening globally. Everyone's trying to make their supply chains more secure. This framework is a huge signal that the US and India are serious about working together, about building reliable alternatives, sharing important tech, and just generally strengthening their ties.
But of course, a deal this big is never going to have 100% approval. There are definitely critics. And to get the full story, we have to listen to the concerns that are being raised, especially from inside India. This quote right here really captures the number one anxiety. You have a lot of Indian farmers and agricultural groups who are genuinely worried. They're looking at this and thinking, what happens if a flood of cheaper American farm goods comes into our market? Could it put us out of business? It's a huge, incredibly sensitive issue there. And it's not just about farming. Economists are asking some tough questions, too. First off, that massive $500 billion import goal, is that even realistic without putting a huge strain on India's economy? And what would that do to the country's overall trade balance? And finally, a lot of the fine print is still not public, which has people calling for more transparency. They want to know what the long-term consequences might be.
So, what we have is a framework that's in place. It's got some clear potential benefits, but also some very real concerns. So, where does that leave us? What happens now, and what should we be keeping an eye on? This timeline lays it all out pretty simply. The initial framework was announced, and it's happening now. Those tariff cuts are in effect. But the really heavy lifting is still going on behind the scenes. Negotiators are working on the details for a full, legally binding treaty, what they call a bilateral trade agreement, or BTA. So we're really just at the beginning of this whole process. And that really brings us back to the big central question, doesn't it? Is this new framework a critical stepping stone, the start of an incredibly powerful economic and strategic partnership? Or, as the critics worry, does it come with a hidden cost, especially for some of India's most vulnerable industries? The real answer? Well, that's going to unfold as this initial deal slowly becomes its final form.